Listen closely because what I am about to share might change how you see your pain forever. When someone betrays you, especially someone who once claimed to love you, it can feel like your whole world is falling apart. But what if that betrayal was never meant to destroy you? What if it was actually the beginning of their unraveling and your awakening? What if the very thing meant to break you turned out to be the moment everything shifted in your favor? Stay with me until the end, because this is not just a story about loss. This is a story about power, clarity, and the quiet kind of victory that comes when you finally see the truth and choose yourself. Betrayal from a narcissist is never really an act of power, no matter how confident they seem or how justified they try to make it look. On the surface, it can appear calculated, even bold, as if they are fully in control, deciding who to keep and who to discard. But underneath that performance is fear, fragility, and an inability to sustain anything real. A narcissist does not betray someone because they are winning. They betray because they are losing control of the story they need to survive. When they feel exposed or emotionally dependent, betrayal becomes their escape, not their triumph. Real strength holds on, protects, and takes responsibility. Betrayal does the opposite. It breaks trust, damages connection, and destroys the very foundation the narcissist secretly needs. They tell themselves that cutting someone off proves their independence, but what it actually shows is how dependent they are on manipulation just to feel important. In the moment of betrayal, they often feel a rush of relief, mistaking that feeling for freedom. That relief never lasts. What follows is a slow, quiet erosion of their inner world, because they have removed the one thing that was keeping them grounded, a real and genuine bond. Self-destruction rarely looks dramatic at first. It starts quietly. The narcissist loses emotional depth. They replace meaning with distraction and trade real intimacy for shallow attention. They repeat the same pattern with new people, but each time it feels less satisfying and more exhausting. Betrayal does not teach them anything except how to run faster from themselves. Over time, the mask grows heavier, the loneliness grows sharper, and eventually the truth becomes impossible to avoid. They did not gain power by betraying someone who loved them. They tore down the only structure that was holding them together, and this is where their biggest miscalculation reveals itself. A narcissist never betrays someone they see as small. They betray someone they secretly fear. They betray someone whose depth, empathy, and emotional strength threaten the fragile image they live inside. From the very beginning, they underestimated you, not because you lacked strength, but because your strength never had to announce itself. You did not dominate or manipulate or demand attention. You simply showed up, loved honestly, and believed in real connection. To a narcissist, that can look like weakness. In truth, it is something they could never create for themselves. They assumed your kindness meant you would put up with anything. They assumed your patience meant endless tolerance, and that your empathy meant you would always give them one more chance. What they never understood is that genuine people do not stay because they are unable to leave. They stay because they see potential, because they value real bonds, because they believe love can grow. And when that belief gets betrayed one too many times, it does not break a person. It wakes them up. The narcissist fails to understand this because they measure power through control, not character. While they were busy testing limits and pushing boundaries just to see how much you would put up with, you were quietly learning exactly who they were. Every broken promise sharpened your awareness. Every dismissal strengthened your instincts. They thought they were wearing you down, when really they were teaching you to see clearly. By the time the betrayal happened, you were already closer to the truth than they ever realized. That is why what happens afterward looks so different for each of you. You begin rebuilding from a place of truth while they scramble to protect an image. You grow stronger on the inside while they chase validation on the outside. They underestimated the person standing in front of them, and in doing so, they lost the one person who was capable of loving them beyond the performance. That loss is quiet, but it is permanent, and it follows them long after you have already moved on. The moment they underestimated you was the exact moment everything began turning against them, because what looked like control was really exposure happening in slow motion. Every manipulation, every small lie, every twisted version of events only worked as long as you doubted yourself. Once your clarity started to form, their tactics stopped looking clever and started looking desperate. A narcissist never realizes that manipulation only works in darkness, and awareness is the light that takes it apart completely. They believed they were shaping the story, but really they were revealing their own patterns while trying to control the narrative. They repeated the same behavior, the same emotional traps, the same cycle of charm followed by cruelty. And repetition is exactly what exposes a manipulator. You did not need to confront them with anger or prove anything out loud. Their own actions spoke for them. The more they tried to control outcomes, the more obvious their insecurity became. What once felt confusing slowly started to feel predictable. This is the turning point that a narcissist never recovers from. Once someone sees the pattern clearly, the illusion falls apart. You stopped reacting the way they expected. You started questioning things calmly instead of begging for answers. You pulled inward instead of chasing reassurance. And in those quiet moments, their power disappeared. Not because you attacked them, but because you stopped feeding the fantasy they depended on. Exposure does not always happen out loud in public. Sometimes it happens quietly, inside a person, and that can be far more powerful. You saw them clearly, without rage, without desperation, and without any need to fix or save them. That calm awareness took away their leverage completely. They could no longer twist your emotions or rewrite your version of reality. Their words stopped carrying weight. Their threats stopped meaning anything. While you were reclaiming your clarity, they were losing their grip. A narcissist does not fall apart when they are confronted. They fall apart when they are truly seen. And once they are seen clearly, the version of themselves they relied on can never be rebuilt the same way again. Once that illusion collapsed and they realized you could see through them, the loss became much deeper than they expected. Because what disappeared was not just your presence, it was their entire sense of self. Narcissists do not build their identity the way healthy people do. They build it through reflection, through how others respond to them, admire them, and need them. You were never just a partner or a source of love to them. You were the emotional mirror that made them feel important, capable, and worthy. When you stepped out of that role, the reflection shattered. They told themselves they could easily replace you, that anyone could fill your place, that attention is attention no matter where it comes from. But replacing someone is not the same as restoring something. New people might offer admiration, but they do not carry history. They do not understand the small details, the emotional language, or the quiet reassurance you gave without ever being asked. What they lost with you was familiarity, depth, and the rare feeling of being truly known. And once that is gone, it cannot be recreated with someone new. This is when the narcissist starts to feel disoriented. Their confidence becomes unstable. Their charm starts to feel forced. They chase validation more urgently, yet feel less and less satisfied by it. The praise they receive does not land the same way because it is not coming from the person who once believed in them before the mask slipped. You gave them something real, or at least something they hoped could become real. Without that anchor, they begin to drift. Meanwhile, you are no longer reflecting back the image they built for themselves. You are no longer reinforcing their story, and that silence becomes deafening. Losing you meant losing the emotional feedback loop that kept their inner emptiness manageable. What is left behind is silence. And a narcissist fears silence because it leaves them alone with the truth. They believe that betrayal would free them from responsibility. Instead, it stripped away the one source that made their identity feel solid. And that loss follows them quietly and relentlessly wherever they go. It does not all collapse at once, because a narcissist's downfall is rarely immediate or dramatic. It unfolds slowly, in ways that are almost invisible at first, even to them. After losing you, they convince themselves they are fine, maybe even thriving. They distract themselves, they perform for others, they keep moving forward. On the surface, life seems unchanged, but underneath, something important has already been set into motion. Without the emotional anchor you once provided, the emptiness they use to manage quietly begins to widen, slowly, relentlessly. They start to feel more alone, even when they are standing in a crowded room. Conversations start to feel shallow. Laughter feels rehearsed. The validation they chase gives shorter and shorter relief. What once satisfied them now barely touches the emptiness underneath. This is the beginning of their isolation. Not because people leave them right away, but because connection no longer reaches them the same way it used to. They become harder to please, quicker to get irritated, more reactive than before. Others sense the instability, even if they cannot quite name what it is. Regret does not arrive for them as remorse. It arrives as restlessness, as constant comparison, as a quiet awareness that something meaningful is missing. They replay moments they once brushed off, searching for the feeling they used to get from you so easily. And when they cannot recreate that feeling, the frustration turns inward. The mask grows heavier. The effort it takes to keep it in place becomes exhausting. While you are slowly rebuilding your sense of peace, the narcissist is quietly wearing away from the inside. They lose patience. They lose consistency. They burn bridges without fully understanding why. Each cycle with someone new ends faster than the last one. Each connection feels more disposable, yet somehow more necessary at the same time. That contradiction eats away at them. Their downfall does not look like public humiliation or instant karma. It looks like slow emotional erosion. A life full of people, but empty of real intimacy. Motion without meaning. Noise without any real fulfillment. Betraying you did not destroy them overnight. It simply ensured they would never feel whole again, and that realization settles in long after you have already begun to heal. In the quiet space where their world is slowly wearing down, something completely different is happening inside you. What they meant as a wound becomes a turning point instead. The pain they caused does not stay only pain. It changes into something else. At first it feels unbearable, like a weight pressing on your chest, like a fog that will not lift. But pain has a strange kind of intelligence when you are willing to face it honestly. It demands answers. It pushes you inward. It forces you to listen to yourself in ways that comfort alone never could. While the narcissist avoids any real reflection at all costs, you are pulled toward it. You start asking yourself questions they will never ask themselves. You look at patterns not to blame yourself, but to understand what happened. You learn where you gave too much, where you ignored your own instincts, where you confused potential with what was actually real. This is not self-punishment. This is waking up. And with every realization, you take back a piece of yourself that had slowly been dimmed. Your healing does not show up loudly. It shows up quietly, in boundaries, in silence, where there used to be over-explaining, in discernment, where there used to be hope with no real evidence behind it. The very experiences that once drained you become the source of your clarity. The betrayal that was meant to destabilize you becomes the very thing that anchors you back to yourself. Meanwhile, the narcissist stays stuck at the point of avoidance. They repeat the same cycles again and again because real growth requires accountability, and accountability threatens the fragile image they are trying to protect. You move forward because you are willing to feel things fully. They stay trapped because they refuse to face themselves. This is where the two paths permanently split apart. Your pain turns into wisdom. Their discomfort turns into denial. You gain depth, self-trust, and emotional resilience. They lose ground, chasing relief without ever finding real resolution. What once connected you now separates you completely. The irony here is impossible to miss. In trying to destroy you, they handed you the exact catalyst you needed to grow. And in refusing to grow themselves, they guaranteed their own stagnation. That is the quiet reversal they never saw coming. As you grow into this new awareness, another truth settles in with complete clarity. One the narcissist only understands much too late. Real love is not something you can simply swap out. It is not something you discard and replace without any consequence. What you offered them was not just affection or attention. It was presence, patience, and emotional truth. You loved with depth, with consistency, and with a willingness to sit in discomfort in order to protect the connection. That kind of love is rare, and once it is lost, it cannot be recreated just because someone wants it back. The narcissist believed love was something they could always find elsewhere, that if one source dried up, another one would simply appear. But as they move from one connection to the next, they slowly start to feel the difference, even if they cannot fully put it into words. New people might admire the surface, but they do not offer the same kind of grounding. They do not see through the performance or tolerate the vulnerability underneath it. They do not stay once the charm starts to fade. And slowly, the narcissist realizes that what they lost with you was not just comfort, but real stability. Regret for them does not sound like an apology. It sounds like constant comparison. Every new interaction gets measured against the emotional safety they once took for granted. Every disagreement feels sharper than it used to. Every absence feels louder. They replay the moments when you showed up for them without being asked, when you believed in them without needing proof first. Those memories stay with them because they cannot be replaced. You, on the other hand, are no longer waiting to be chosen by anyone. Your healing has taught you that love has to be mutual in order to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy or sacrifice with devotion. While they chase echoes of what they once had, you are quietly building something grounded and sustainable for yourself. By the time the narcissist fully understands the value of real love, it is already gone. And that realization follows them quietly and persistently, long after you have learned to give that same love back to yourself. As you turn that love inward and begin rebuilding from a place of truth, another contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Healing lifts you up. Bitterness weighs them down. You had every reason to stay angry, to replay the betrayal over and over, to let resentment shape who you are. But healing teaches you something the narcissist never learns. Pain that is processed becomes freedom. Pain that is avoided becomes a prison. You chose to feel, to grieve, to actually understand what happened. And in doing that, you loosened the grip the past had on you. The narcissist, on the other hand, cannot afford to let go of bitterness because it helps them avoid taking responsibility. They rewrite the story to protect their own image, casting themselves as misunderstood or wronged in some way. That version of events might soothe them for a little while, but it keeps them stuck in the same emotional loop. Every grievance becomes another brick in the wall they live inside. They stay reactive, defensive, and suspicious of others, unable to find real peace, because peace requires honesty. As you heal, your energy shifts. You are no longer driven by the need to prove anything. You move through life with clarity instead of urgency. You respond instead of react. Life starts to feel lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place. That lightness is noticeable to others. It draws in healthier connections and pushes away the chaos you once thought was normal. Meanwhile, bitterness isolates the narcissist even further. Relationships start to feel like a battle. Trust feels risky. Every interaction gets filtered through fear of being exposed or abandoned. They might look confident on the outside, but underneath there is a constant tension that never really settles. Healing could release them from all of this, but healing requires vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the image they cling to so tightly. So the distance between you keeps growing. You rise into peace while they stay anchored to resentment, not because you were stronger from the very beginning, but because you were willing to let go, and that willingness changes everything.